Hello, Azure Platform Engineering friends. Welcome to a new episode of the APE podcast. I am Mark Scholman, and this time I have with me on the show Bert Wolters, aka AzureMan. In this show, we're going to talk about Azure Platform Engineering, the why, the what, and the how. Bert, welcome on the show. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Mark. Nice to be here. My name is indeed Bert Wolters, and I am an MVP from the Netherlands. And the fun thing is, I'm an MVP in hybrid Azure. So my background is in data center management, always from the Microsoft stand of view. So working with System Center, Hyper-V, storage, all those cool things in the past. And now for the last 15 years, focused solely on Azure.
15 years Azure. That's quite a journey, Bert. Very nice. If we take a look at platform engineering, practice evolved from DevOps, and both had their own roles. The dev style is what I like to call a top-to-bottom approach, and it means platform engineering is perceived, of course, from a developer view to the infrastructure view. So you go from the application to microservices. From the microservices, you need developer portals and you need automation for the application deployment. And then a developer expect infrastructure platform to exist. Expect the platform to be monitored and maintained, etc. And the other option is to look at it is from an ops scenario, also known from bottom to up. And this scenario is more looked from infrastructure perspective. So we see infrastructure needs. We need to ensure the infrastructure platform is ready, automated, and consumable in a self-service way. And eventually, with some other guardrails like a landing zone or well-architect framework or cloud adoption framework, we make sure that the guardrails and the governance is done, finished for platform consuming. And on top of that platform, we can deliver self-service. And that's where I believe DevOps is coming together and it's evolving to platform engineering. What is your side and your take on this topic, Bert?
Well, if we look at platform engineering and how Microsoft defines it, Microsoft is very strict in saying it is built up from DevOps. Um, well, I have a slightly different opinion on that because I see still in the field a lot of companies doing clickops. They are just using the portal to manage their resources. And I think that not involving ClickOps people into our Azure Platform Engineering vision is somewhat of a shortcoming for us as an APE community.
Okay.
I think the DevOps principle is a good way to go if you're working in a regulated environment, if you are doing repetitive tasks. Then the investment to create code for your actions inside the Azure ecosystem makes sense. But looking at it from a business perspective, I think there should also be some kind of return on investment. And if it takes an engineer 3 weeks to write code, what can be done once a year with 20 seconds of click work, go for the click work because that makes more sense financially as well. Again, it differs from industry to industry. If you're working in a regulated environment and you have to do audits and you have to show that you're really adhering to a 4I principle, that you have regular code checks, that you have a revision history of your code. Of course, DevOps, the way to go, and not even the DevOps way of working, but even more so DevOps, the product. But again, if you're doing something once a year, which takes way longer to do in code, yeah, I'd still prefer doing it the ClickOps way.
So you're the ClickOps guy.
Now, I'm the ClickOps guy.
So
well,
what,
again, the financial ClickOps guy.
yeah, the ROI checking, do I get my return on
Yes.
investment kind of things. But how do we deal with people that clicking things together and after 2 years leaving the company and after 3 years the application needs to be revised and we don't have these,
Yeah, well,
documentation.
great question. Nowadays, anything we click together inside the Azure portal, we can also reverse engineer into templates. And that isn't really a closed solution yet, because there are some deviations where we cannot do those things. But again, those deviations are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and more things can be reverse engineered into templates. So even after the fact of deploying it, you can have that environment, that resource, that piece of application as code in a repository somewhere.
Okay.
Now, the whole discussion about platform engineering, I think platform engineering is an next step in my profession, data center management. Because the whole management of that physical layer in Azure is not with us anymore.
No.
But we are still responsible as an organization to provide access to portals, to provide building blocks. Maybe you are working in a company and you have this cloud center of excellence that are providing building blocks of Azure resources to the environment, to the rest of the company. That is something done in general by platform engineering people.
And if you take a look at some of the principles, they say that you have to think customer centric, right? And what is a customer,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's usually a challenge that I have with explaining platform engineering. Are my customers who are consuming my product, but what are my
Mm-hmm.
internal developers? Those are also customers from a platform engineering perspective, because they need to consume the
Yep.
platform. And how do you see the involvement and integration of those teams of customers that are going to consume the platform from you as a platform engineer that are building those systems?
Mm-hmm.
What do we need for that?
Well, I think that is a quite difficult situation, and I think that mainly depends on how adult the organization is where you're working in. Customers, internal, are your consumers of services. They should be led by a product owner. The product owner, with the product owner from the building blocks team, from the platform engineer team, can set certain priorities. So, in good conversation with your customers, aka those POs, you can set the order of work in your sprints.
So it's more like chunking up the work into smaller chunks, so it's consumable by the platform engineers to actually deliver the platform that needs to be built. And we did in the past a lot of Azure Stack on Tour trainings. So and we
Mm-hmm.
always use the phrase "it's a journey." Remember? And
Oh yeah, yes.
I think the whole platform engineering job is a journey as well, where we the first phase is to establish a platform engineering product team, right? And then the next step
Mm-hmm.
is to automate all those areas that are comprising of that platform actually. And then you need
Mm-hmm.
to have eventually a self-service portal or automation available so that your customers, aka internal developers, or indeed your customers that are consuming your service, will have a
Mm-hmm.
self-service experience so that they can consume the platform, right?
But you're an automation guy, right?
A little bit.
How do you see that working nowadays in those big enterprises you work with? Are they building this near Azure functionality to provide services to Azure? Are they creating their own little Azure portal with automation to deploy stuff in Azure?
So there are different approaches. I've been the last couple of years I've been working on building. You can say it's a cloud management platform, but it's solely focused on Azure actually, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a management platform system in which our customers could
Mm-hmm.
consume building blocks. and that was
Mm-hmm.
like, we call that not the landing zone was not a hot topic back then, so we built our own core definition of resources that everyone gets. And then on top of that,
Mm-hmm.
we deploy maybe an AKS cluster for a container platform. Or we build function app and web apps and API management for a web app platform. So the whole journey was around creating that platform management system
Mm-hmm.
so that our customers, our teams could consume those in a semi-automatic way, because we were not in a stage where, we have a fancy portal on top of it and we can click everything together. It was
Mm-hmm.
in code. So people could go to a repo, they could clone it, and if they wanted
Yep.
to have something,
Mm-hmm.
they could add a piece of JSON in a config file, and then we
Mm-hmm.
deployed it. That was our way of actually building that platform engineering platform or cloud management platform.
Okay.
Um,
So you had this management platform website, and people could go there and get the code for all kinds of products.
It was just in Azure DevOps, right? So we had a wiki, what was there, what we have built, and uh, the advantage that we had with that platform is because we pen tested. It was a requirement from that organization, so we could pen test
Mm-hmm.
certain blocks, like the container platform block, the API management
Yeah.
instance block. So once we have an authority to operate approval from CISO,
Mm-hmm.
pen tester, security department, whatever it is in your organization, um, we could then tell our customers, if you take this particular block, you can deploy that to the production and you are ready for production. You're ready to operate in production. Because we implemented the best practices. But I also believe the whole differences with what we have today with Azure landing zones. If you look at Azure landing zone
Mm-hmm.
deployments, in my opinion, that is a subset of guardrails to guide people with the deployment of landing zones in Azure. We did it the other way
Mm-hmm.
around. We stripped everything off, right? And we did the deployment for them. And,
Mm-hmm.
when we did it our way, it was the correct way, let's quote unquote, because, there's no one good rule to do a certain deployment, but in our way, it was at
Mm-hmm.
least secure and ready to operate in production.
If we look at guardrails, I, as an Azure veteran infrastructure dude, when you say guardrails, I immediately think, oh yeah, Azure policy.
That's actually a huge
And
part
there
of the
are a lot of
equation.
ways. Sorry.
That is actually a huge part of the equation. Policies
Mm.
and also hierarchy is if you take a look at those landing zones. But yeah, it's becoming part of the
Oh
platform
wow.
engineering journey, right? Because it allows organizations to have a base footprint of their Azure environment, depending on the size of the organization,
Hmm.
to jumpstart their
True.
journey inside the Azure platform engineering space.
Yeah. And lots of times I see, and I consider this as being part of the governance structure of Azure environments. Lots of times organizations start thinking about governance when they've put their first feet on the Azure platform. Okay, so we are onboarded now, we're running services. How are we going to get in control now?
Yeah.
And for me, that is still the other way around of working. I'd like to see organizations getting hands on and tackling that governance stuff first, naming conventions, setting and designing their hierarchy of subscriptions and management groups. And if you're into that hierarchy, okay, let's tackle the next big thing, Azure policy. Which policies? Why? I'll repeat. Why?
Well,
There
the
are
why is usually
so many policies.
the why with policies is usually coming from a higher policy standards, right? Maybe you need to be ISO compliant, and that's actually one of the discussions I usually have, and I'm curious about your experience. When we do Azure Platform Engineering in the new way, where we use Azure landing zones with the other company I'm
Yeah.
working for, we see a lot of pushback against all these Azure landing zones because it is literally blocking them with deployments. But I think that's exactly the point, right? It's their journey to transform and build their building blocks or their resources in a way that it's consumable within the standards, the guardrails that eventually we as the same team need to
Yeah.
implement in that organization. How do you see that?
Yeah, similar. I'm currently working with a customer who are indeed rolling out Azure building blocks for the business. They've set up a standard building blocks also for Azure policy, so those guardrails. And now we're about 2 or 3 years underway.
Wow.
We see that certain guardrails are blocking simple deployments. Because, for instance, when you deploy resource A, what Microsoft does underwater is deploy a storage account with a public endpoint. Well, Microsoft, we decided to block all storage accounts with a public endpoint by policy.
Yep.
So the deployment of resource A will fail.
Yep.
So we'll have to go back to the drawing board and get an exception from CISO. Yes, we know we shouldn't do this, but our deployment needs this for this and this reason. So again, even if you think you are in control, you have the right policies set, it is still an ongoing, and I'll use your word here, journey to get all next steps deployable, but also regulated.
So if we look at platform engineering from a principle and journey to mature Azure Platform Engineering, it actually means that there are a lot of blocks blocking things on the road that need to be jumped over, right? And we need to see on how can we as Azure Platform engineers overcome those challenges. What do you think if you are a new guy into Azure Platform Engineering? What are your tips to start?
First thing is keep your knowledge current. There is so much information out there that has been surpassed by new developments. But that's also something I'd like to say to organizations. The Azure platform is IT, but it isn't your father's IT anymore.
Fair enough.
The pace is much higher with innovation. Security can be much tighter, and it keeps on evolving. So if you are an organization who is doing their own internal security, for instance, and you were accustomed to doing security baselines checks once a year, well, better get more people in because you need to check this at least every 3 months.
Yep.
Because features in Azure, they evolve themselves. They can have additional features in preview or not. Maybe even new services. We saw that with, for instance, with the firewall manager, which can manage your NSGs centrally. Now, if you've decentralized your network management to all the DevOps teams, but there's one lucky guy who gets his hands on your tenant-wide Azure firewall management instance, guess what? If your RBAC isn't correct, they can influence all the network security groups where you are depending on to be secure. And knowledge is key in this. But also hygiene. There is, for everything you deploy in Azure, there is a price tag. If you delete certain items, the price will drop or you will stop paying for those things. But hey, those items you delete may be connected to other things. Small example, You have this virtual machine, you throw it away. What keeps lingering? A public IP address. And 5 public IP addresses are not that bad because the price for 5 public IP addresses are included in your subscription. But if you have 25 and you start paying for 20 of those, then you'll get the feedback, oh, Azure is an expensive platform.
Yep.
Yes, if you don't throw away your stuff in the recycle bin, it can become very expensive. And that is also, again, the knowledge thing. We love, especially from a security standpoint, to have everything connected to our own private network. Again, there is a discussion coming. Do you want everything on your private network? Or do you want it cheap? For instance, if you have a look at Service Bus,
Oh,
yes, you can connect a Service Bus to your private endpoint. Not a problem. But for that, you need the premium SKU. And the premium SKU is not that cheap.
it's pricey. Yep.
Yes. So there again, people, especially in this day and age, are looking at finances more and more. There is going to be discussion. Do we really need this level of security? The old-fashioned security where everything is connected to a local area network, even in Azure? Or can we do it safer, cheaper, when it's connected to the public network?
Fair. So that's more about the plan and prioritize actually phase, right, of the journey. So we if we look at Azure Platform Engineering, the journey, it's building the team. So your advice is get your knowledge level up to speed. Make sure you stay
Yep.
up to speed with the knowledge. Then, of course, define the problem space. What are the challenges as our team with Azure Platform Engineering? What are the challenges and problems that we can define and need to solve? And then plan and
True.
prioritize, right? So those are the 3
Yep.
steps that walks you through that journey of Azure
True.
Platform Engineering. And how do you see, especially also with Azure landing zones? We're going to have a whole topic and specific episode on Azure landing zones, but how do you see the refinement from many companies that already started with Azure and now suddenly just start to embrace DevOps principles and now are going to move up to the ladder and Azure Platform Engineering and need to, refine that platform to that new way of thinking? How do you see that happening,
Yeah.
and what are, in your opinion, the steps towards that refinement?
Yeah, I see a couple of things happening. I see companies who are creating a mirrored environment next to their current production environment and basically starting over. And that is fully in line with having cattle and not pets
Yep.
in Azure. I know we talked about this like 5 years ago or maybe 10 even.
I know.
But it's still true. And people and bigger companies are still looking at resources in Azure as being those sweet little furry pets you want to cuddle. But
Yes.
that is right opposed to the DevOps way of working, where everything you change means we redeploy.
Yep.
So that's the way I see happening now. I see the old stuff in kind of a dying mode, and then organizations building new subscriptions in automated ways with their hierarchy in place and their guardrails in place in landing zones next to it, and then switching over. Again, that might not give you the best return on investment right now because, hey, you have 2 environments, so twice the cost. But in the long run, you will have a more DevOps approach. You can adhere to more current standards, and again, you'll be up to speed with the platform engineering way of working.
Yeah. And does it mean that our jobs are in danger? Because if we do things more automatically and more in an automated way, end to end, and if we finalize
Hmm.
the last step of the APE journey, developing a
Yeah,
self-service foundation for your customers, what is our job?
true. Yeah, providing the building blocks to our customers and maintaining them. And again, that is where the knowledge is key. If you're slacking and you're not up to speed to the latest standards, how can you update the experience for your developers?
Yeah,
If you don't know what's out there, you cannot create it in code. So again, if you're up to date to the latest and greatest, you will have a far smaller chance of being sacked for not being in the right space.
fair.
Um,
That
but again, this sounds like the turkey on Christmas Eve story. We had these with the exchange administrators as well,
we still
and
need
we
them.
always say, yeah,
They are
true.
involved.
Your job is yeah, your job isn't gone, but it's
Yeah.
changing.
And I think that's also something that we have discussed also when we did the Azure Stack on tour a couple of years back, that people were really afraid
Hmm.
when they were migrating from network silos, storage silos, compute silos to
Hmm.
Azure operators. And I believe that the same with Azure Platform Engineering. It's you evolve into a new role, and
True.
the only question you need to ask yourself: do I like that new role, and do I want to be there or not?
Hmm.
And my advice
True.
is, don't struggle it. Right? Either make a choice, go for it, or
True.
you should maybe find something that is still doing legacy.
True. And in the past, we've talked to many of our former colleagues as well. Some of them even said, "Well, I'm not getting out of the data center space because that Azure stuff isn't technical enough for me."
Yep.
Well, tie all those components together.
If you
I'll
look at
challenge you.
Azure infrastructure complexity nowadays, with everything that is there and manageable from an
Hmm.
infra perspective, it's really
True.
complex. It's as
True.
complex as we did back in the data center, but it's evolved
True.
in a new way, where you can do ClickOps and where you can do automation. That's where I
True.
see things are going. Cool. Do you have any other last topics or advice that you want to give to our listeners or viewers around Azure Platform
No,
Engineering?
I think you just touched a very important topic, and I think that is something in our industry we talk too little about, and that is think about if you're really enjoying what you do. Um, that is part of your motivation. That is part of avoiding mental health issues. That is part of. I want to go for a very extreme example, but I'll spare you for this one. Um, oh wait, you can cut it out. It will avoid you hitting your wife when you get home. Um, you should really think about: am I in the right space in the right time?
Yep.
Um, in the past, when you were a Windows Server admin, you would study your Windows Server 2003, and I'm sure you could use your knowledge and work your way all the way up to Windows Server 2016 because it's still a Windows Server. IIS interface hasn't changed that much. You can still be a server admin, and you can count down the days until you're retired.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is good as well, right? I
that
mean,
is not. I.
let me also pause you there, because I think there
Mhm.
are also a lot of people in a certain age that are fine with that methodology, right? If
Again,
if I
but
need
they are
7 more years,
fine with that.
if I need 7 more years in my working job before I retire, I'm good with that, which
Mhm.
is all fine, right?
True.
We also need those
And
people.
again, they are enjoying that.
Exactly.
But do you want to add value to your company? Do you want to have a career in IT for the foreseeable future?
Yep.
Get on the bandwagon. Know about platform engineering. Know about AI. No, your company doesn't have to use it, but at least know where are the benefits and where are the dangers.
Yep. And
And that also goes for the entire Azure platform. If there's anyone out there that says, and I'm not talking about Mark Rusinovich, but normal people out there that say, I know everything about anything in Azure, I don't think you're really telling the truth.
no.
There is so much out there.
True.
So if you are excited about the Azure platform, also pick your technologies where you're comfortable. Don't be afraid to specialize.
True. I think that's a good summary, because if you look at Azure Platform Engineering, it becomes such a wide topic now again, right? DevOps
True.
was you could chop it in half. You have dev side of things and you have
Hmm.
ops side of things.
Yeah.
And now with Azure Platform Engineering, we are melting things back together into one uh, principle, so to speak. And
Hmm.
from there,
True.
it might be a little bit confusing. What is my role inside Azure Platform Engineering? And I
Hmm.
think, as Bert mentioned, it's good to focus on a small area and widen that out. But at least start somewhere, because that's the direction where we're
True.
going.
Yeah.
Bert, thank you very much for all your insights and knowledge. It was very good to have you on the show. All the viewers and listeners, thanks for listening. And next episode, we will dive into Azure Landing Zones. What are Azure Landing Zones? How can I implement them? What do I need to transform my current Azure environment to an Azure Landing Zone hierarchy? Thanks everyone, and see you the next time.